30 seconds. Kayla on top. Someone's gonna need a triple to get her. Triple or a steal. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Burn. What's it gonna be? Asia and Kayla. Let me see them percentages. Turn around and just show me. You don't show anybody else. Woo! That starts with a 9. That starts with a 9. Yeah, boy, go get a drink. I made a deal with you. Go get a drink. Like my pass. It was easy though. Everybody else will not care what your percentage. And this. All right. David, how many questions you answered? 7. Good. That was slow. Yeah, you guys are cutting into my trunk and treat stash. Well done.
I know you don't like that stuff.
Well done. So, I'm impressed. I know the challenge was the 9s and a couple of you got that. I saw a lot of 8s. That is great. Guys,
I'll tell you, I'll do much better than
I haven't taught half of this yet. So, you know what? Your crypto points, I could care less about your crypto points. I am impressed with your percentage. Well done. All right, today, break out your notes. We're actually going to get to 6 vocab terms. And, writing the term, that's one thing. I'm going to be writing I'm going to be telling you a bunch of extras, part of the story as well. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff, the kind of stuff that's pretty close to us in history. We're going to talk about the Vietnam War, and I bet some of you have kin, grandparents, uncles, nieces maybe even, or aunts maybe, because women participate in the service as well, of course. Some of you probably have kin that participated in the Vietnam War, or even if they weren't in the military, they were alive during that time period and maybe you talked about it before. So we are walking closer to today. We're getting really close to history that you've actually lived, and that is, go get whatever you need, go for it. That kind of makes history more interesting, right? When it's closer to where we're at, it makes the history a little bit more interesting. So are you situated yet? Now, I'm going to do a pretty good job of telling you what to write. Actually, I can tell you right now, I want you to write everything in green. I actually went through and highlighted the bare minimum definition in green. So if you see green in my presentation, it's what I want you to write down. Now, of course, you could always be writing extra. You got the whole double-sided extra sheet where you can fill in extra thoughts, extra vocab that maybe I'm not specifically saying you need to get to. But if you see green, you should know you need to write it down. That's one of your big vocab terms. The statement I want you to write down is pretty darn close to the definition you see on Bookit. That's because that's the definition I'm trying to drill into your head. But like I said, feel free to write down anything extra that's interesting. I love it when you've been turning your pages in, and many of you have been writing extras. Sometimes I write a little side note. I appreciate the extra notes you've taken. Wow, that's interesting. I appreciate, good job taking notes on that. So good job taking the extra notes. Here's how I want to start today's conversation. Now, we've been talking about international issues, and today is going to round out a bunch of international issues. We will then turn to domestic issues. But through all of these are fitting under different presidents. And we're not exactly going 100% in order. So I want to make sure that you know the order of the presidents that's going on here. And I'm just going to try to give you the visual. A lot of U.S. history classes, big requirement is to memorize the states and capitals. Oh, we haven't done that, right? A lot of U.S. history classes, big requirement is to memorize all 46 presidents, take a test on them in order. We haven't done that. I think that's a great thing to do. I really do. But what we focused on is not that type of memorization. So because of that, I just want to make sure we're on the right track, and I'm going to show it to you like this. Coming off of World War II, the first president we're dealing with, he dropped the atomic bomb, was Harry Truman, President Truman. The next president is Eisenhower. He starts off as a general. He's actually the general in charge of what big turning point battle?
Midway,
Nope, the other one.
D-Day.
D-Day. He's the general that's in charge of D-Day. He's going to take responsibility if it fails. I showed you his note. That's Eisenhower. Kennedy, oh, he's so handsome. He looks so good. We just talked about his interactions with Marilyn Monroe. JFK, of course, he has a tragic end. It ends with assassination. We will talk about that. Next up is JFK. The Vietnam War kind of starts right here on the small side. Vietnam is mostly associated with President Johnson. His vice president, he becomes president when Kennedy dies. Boom, is the president because he was the vice president. Johnson actually gets so tired of leading through the war, he chooses to not run for re-election, and that opens the door for Nixon. Nixon runs for president and is elected at that point. And then these next three, we're not quite there yet, but I'm still going to say them to you. President Ford is a little bit less notable. He has a shorter time in office, but we still need to know him. This young fellow, where was he born? Jimmy Carter, where was he born?
Plains, Georgia.
Plains, Georgia. Georgia, and you said Plains. That's awesome. Where he still teaches Sunday school every Sunday to this day. So President Carter.
Oh, he's still alive.
He's still alive. He's a citizen of his town, and he teaches Sunday school at his small little Baptist church.
How old is he?
80 plus.
God,
We'll find that out. Good question. He's
Maybe
old.
it's time to
He's old.
retire.
And then President Ronald Reagan, we will kind of round out this big Cold War era with President Reagan. That's why I have these 8 presidents up. They are the Cold War presidents. 8 presidents dealing with this communist versus capitalist Cold War. So there you have it. I'm going to keep saying these presidents' names, and I just wanted you to understand that. Now, Miss Roser and myself, it's okay. Hey, you're allowed to sneeze, cough, yawn. We just move on. We just move on with it. Ms. Roser and myself, we got a pretty good strategy to try to help you guys review. And one of those things is going to be to help you memorize, help you understand what goes with what president. So if it feels like a whole lot of them coming at you, I get it. We're going to try to simplify it as we roll into review time for the EOC. But for right now, think about international issues. Then we're going to do domestic issues, and there's some crossover on these presidents. So there's that. Let's talk about containment in action. We've already talked about the Korean War. This time we're going to talk about the Vietnam War. Now, you can probably have a whole course on the Vietnam War, right? I always say if this was a military class, man, I'd be all in on the military side of the Vietnam War. We could spend so much time talking about the Vietnam War. And maybe some of you will take a history class in college or beyond where you focus on the Vietnam War. But in this class, I got this much time to do the Vietnam War, so that's why I got to go kind of fast. Pretty much the same setup as was the Korean War. You have communists in the north, and then you have the capitalists and democracy in the south. So just like the Korean War, the north was communist, the south is capitalist, and what we're going to see here is a pretty slow build of troop support. Okay, there is no single date which will live in infamy. There wasn't this big call to war. In fact, we're going to see that it's one of those things where we didn't even declare war. This is the Vietnam War. Now, you guys probably old enough to have had some conversations, and you may see the Vietnam War in a negative light. You may remember that it's a time where veterans were treated pretty poorly. Some of them even coming home and being spit on and called baby killer. So we got a whole generation of Vietnam veterans who are still alive. They're at the VFW, they're at the Legion, they're in your churches. Maybe they wear that black hat that says Vietnam veteran, or you just know that they served. Maybe they're in your family. And we're going to learn their story a little bit, and I hope will kind of inspire you to maybe ask them some questions and learn from them. If you got someone like that in your life, I hope you'll be able to respectfully ask some questions and learn from them. Why does Vietnam matter? Remember that domino effect? We thought that if one nation toppled, the next nation would topple, and then the next nation would topple. They actually had an order that they thought the nations would topple. China, it did. Korea, we know there was fighting there. And then Vietnam, we thought Vietnam might be next. Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, these are all real close. So there's a lot riding on protecting Vietnam. We want to put a lid on communism. What's that called? Containment. Put a lid on it. It's called containment. This is going to stay in our room till our test. And and I hope it'll remind you of containment. Right?
So,
Yes, maybe it's gonna get a incentive, what would it get saturated and get all pulpy. Anyway, the domino effect, we're putting a lid on it. That's why we're gonna go fight the Vietnam War. Here's a couple upfront terms to know. Don't write. I know that's in blue, it shouldn't be. Don't write. This is an upfront. I'm just kind of bring your brain to all that we're gonna talk about. This is basically the beginning, the middle, and the end. That's a good way to tell a story, right? The war starts with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, and this is what gives the president the authority to do the military actions in Vietnam. Not a war, right? Here again, we go to not a war. Jose's not here today. He said a police action yesterday. So we don't declare a war. Jose, TV, he's not here today. Police, so the Gulf of Tonkin, I'm gonna tell you all about that in just a second. I wish I could tell you about all the battles. I don't have time for that, but a major one is the Tet Offensive, and I'm gonna tell you about the Tet Offensive. We'll talk about the military side of things a little bit there. So beginning, that's the middle. And then the end of the word is called Vietnamization. Vietnamization, that's how we pull out of Vietnam. That's how we leave Vietnam. And we're going to see whether we won the war or whether we're not quite sure that we didn't win the war, and that's kind of harmful to our country. So the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. I don't write this yet because I want you to write what's in green. Remember, you're going to see a lot of words on the screen today, and here's what I'm going to tell you. That's kind of for me to tell the story, right? So if you look at the screen and you see a lot of words, just listen to what I have to say. If there's a picture and you want to focus on the picture, that's a good thing to do. But there's a lot of words on the screen. It's kind of to help me tell the story. So don't get freaked out by how many words on the screen. Gulf of Tonkin. It's a big patch of water. Boom, just like boom, right there by Vietnam. Okay, it's just a gulf. It's a gulf of water. We have Navy ships there. The United States has Navy ships there. And while our Navy ships are there supporting South Vietnam, they are attacked, allegedly, by the North Vietnamese. These ships sink. So here again, we have ships that sink that draw us into war. Remember the Maine?
Yeah.
Remember the Lusitania?
Yeah.
Well, we don't really have a remember cry that comes from this, but it's an act of aggression, and more or less, it kind of draws us into the war in the first place. So North Vietnamese are accused of attacking 2 vessels. Here's what the president does. He goes to Congress. He gets approval from Congress in order to retaliate. They retaliate on North Vietnamese ships. You did my ships, I do your ships. Kind of measured, right? It's fair. It doesn't really draw us all the way into the war, but we're going to see how it opens the door to the war. Here's what I want you to actually write down. Every time you see green today, I want you to be writing it down. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution is what Congress passed that actually gave the president authorization to conduct military operations in Southeast Asia without a declaration of war. This was not a declaration of war, but it opened the door for the president to basically make war legally without a declaration of war. So it's almost that workaround. It's a little a side door into actually making the war. And this is a big policy change in the United States, where instead of declaring a war and then we put our soldiers in harm's way, we can actually just kind of have an open-ended military operations agreement. We can send our troops overseas. Remember, we're not isolated at home anymore. We're getting involved in the world for the purposes of containing communism. And this is a big change in American attitudes. Opens the door to going to Iraq and going to Afghanistan and the global war on terrorism that you guys have always lived under and that I participated in. So I'll let you write down what's in green, and we'll be watching your pencils, see who gets finished. If you're done writing, go ahead and look at the picture that's on the screen. This is the actual resolution. I don't know what you think a resolution looks like, but that is it. Kind of fancy looking paper with scrolly looking writing. Go ahead and look at what you think what stands out at you about the resolution.
No signature.
I'm going to point something out in here a second. Okay, you see the signatures. What else?
The numbers at the top.
Okay, numbers at the top. Looks like it's kind of for filing purposes. Going to make sure this gets filed in the right place.
The red square.
To me, that's the fancy part of it. Probably on parchment paper, a little thick paper, not exactly just like your computer paper. Pretty much done writing?
No.
Yeah. See, I'm trying to give everybody a chance while we have this extra little conversation. Here's what should stand out to you. It's a little bit of it's not a trick, but it's something you wouldn't notice till I point it out. There is no expiration date. It's literally blank. This chunk right here, my finger kind of goes over it. That chunk right there, it's a space for when this resolution expires, but it doesn't expire. They didn't say you have until December 31st to figure this out. They didn't say you have until 1965 to figure this out. There's literally no expiration date. So how long can the president maintain troops in Southeast Asia? However long he wants is a good way to put it, indefinitely. So that's kind of a flaw in what they passed because they gave the president a lot of power by not putting an expiration date on it. So Gulf of Tonkin resolution, this is the slow slide to over 500,000 troops entering Vietnam. 500,000, 500,000 American soldiers are in Vietnam by the end of 1968. That's just 4 years later. That is a lot of soldiers leaving home, going across the ocean.
And in fact, a lot of them were the younger guys that had just finished their last game on the football field. They were getting ready to graduate, and boom, here they are getting a letter in the mail that says they have to go by draft to Vietnam. Okay, so I don't know about you, but that's a little scary. 17, 18 years old, you're going over, and it's to boost up the amount of men that we have over there so that we can cover our ground. So big and scary.
That draft is compulsory military service. Doesn't mean you have a choice. We had the recruiter in the lunchroom today, right? You get to choose if you want to join the military today. He's giving you pencils and lanyards and trying to inspire you to join. Back then, it was compulsory. If they called your number, you went. David Hernandez, number 123, you're up. You would have to go. You cannot turn away without becoming a criminal. Now, some people did. They ran to Canada. They burned their draft cards. They got arrested. They went to jail. That's a different part of the story. The draft leads to problems at home. So we're going to see the war become very, very unpopular at home. As the U.S. gets involved, at first the Russians weren't involved, but by gosh, they're going to get involved to protect their communist partner in crime. So the U.S. getting involved draws the Soviets and the Chinese, who are communists, into the war as well. So we have a bit of a proxy war. Started off with two other people fighting each other, but now we got the big brothers on both sides, right? The communists and the capitalists, the blue and the red, are now fighting each other. Hey, head up, stand up, or push-ups. All of you. Hoorah. Head up, stand up, or push. You can stand up, guys. That's not gonna hurt my feelings. You can stand up, shake your arms out, do some air squats, get that blood flowing. But head up, stand up, or do push-ups. I ain't gonna let you sleep in my class. Here's something I want you to write down. This is in yellow, should be in green. Write this down. Vietnam War. The U.S. military got involved in Vietnam at the request of South Vietnam to protect them from communist takeover of North Vietnam. This is the big summary of the war. I'm going to be telling you, a lot of details in the next 10 or so minutes, but this is the big summary of the Vietnam War. U.S. military got involved at the request of South Vietnam. Purpose was to protect them from a communist takeover by North Vietnam. But they knew that we had containment policies. They knew that we didn't want them to fall to communism. So it would be natural that we would come to their defense. What we didn't know at the time was how much it was going to cost our country. Money, sure, money's one thing, but people, blood, deaths, that's another big thing that we didn't quite know at that time. I'll let you write down this whole statement.
And what's real about this war is it's more recent. So a lot of your grandparents or great-grandparents were involved in this war, maybe even the Korean War. Both very similar in style. But, a lot of them, they don't like to talk about it, especially the rough parts of it, just because it's too hard for them to remember. So, but don't veer from not asking them. You should. And they'll give you some insight, but it's a tough war.
Getting a whole lot closer to the history that we've actually lived through ourselves. And I think that always makes it a little bit more interesting to know that it's kind of impacting our lives personally. A couple more seconds here, let you finish this sentence. Now, what I'm gonna do in the next 10 or so minutes, I'm gonna show you a lot of pictures. I'm gonna tell you how some of the war happened. I hope it'll be interesting to you, and it'll make you remember the big ideas a little bit better. All right, moving on. So, Vietnam War, here's 3 big points for you. Just listen, right? Just listen. The setup was very similar to the Korean War. Communists in the north, democracy and capitalism in the south. Ho Chi Minh, you see that name highlighted in yellow? It's a very famous name of one of our enemies. He was on the north side. He was a communist. You know what? He'd been a soldier for decades. He fought the British. They used to be invading Vietnam. Beat the British. He fought the French. Beat the French. He's like, all right, Americans, you're next, right? We'll wait you out. Ultimately beats the Americans. And you might say that Vietnam was impossible to conquer because the people there were always just going to wait out the invaders. Not all that different from Afghanistan. And we can make a lot of comparisons from the Vietnam War to our fighting in Afghanistan. And I got a lot of personal experience with that. We can talk about that, anytime you want. The fighting in Vietnam was characterized by guerrilla warfare. We've heard this word before. How have we heard about guerrilla warfare?
That was old, wasn't it?
We talked about it before. The American Revolution turns on guerrilla warfare, right? What is a characteristic of guerrilla warfare? What does that actually even mean? They're like, ooh, guerrilla? Say, Dave, it is how they fight. And then what did you say?
Hiding.
Hiding behind trees, pop-ups, sneak attack. That's right. Where the British were marching in rows, just getting mowed down, the Americans were willing to fight like the Indians, hide behind the trees, use the land. This is the same type of fighting we're going to see in Vietnam. And we are a country that's coming off of that big land warfare in Europe, right? Nazis have a uniform, and they're the bad guys. We fight the bad guys. In guerrilla warfare, it's kind of hard to know who the bad guy is. They blend in with civilians. Maybe they don't even have a uniform. Big battle we had to get through was the jungle. I say it's a battle. Like something we had to deal with was the jungle. This big open warfare in Europe is not at all like the jungle warfare in Vietnam. It was damp, it was hot, it was wet. You can think about just like the trench foot that happened in World War I, same type of diseases would come from the damp, the hot, the wet, the mosquitoes. So soldiers going through some pretty miserable conditions in order to just to even be there, just to even survive, much less actually fight the war. Something the Americans did, this is a very American thing to do. We brought all the technology that we had with us because tanks worked last time. How's that tank working out in the jungle? Yeah, a lot of the technology we brought with us, heavy armored vehicles, tanks, wasn't going to work out in the jungle. That's actually an American tank. That is, it just got left there. Broke down, that's where it stopped. It's still there today, right? I don't know if it's a tourist attraction or it's just a local tank, but the Americans brought tanks to the jungle. Like that was going to help us win the war. It did not work out. So just because we had the technology, just because we were an advanced, urbanized, industrial nation, didn't mean that it was going to work in the jungle. They are.
Why is that little thing on the barrel?
What's that?
It's got 2 holes on each side.
Yeah, that's a flash suppressor is what that is. I'm not the total tank expert. I'm an infantry officer. So someone asked me a similar question, third block. I don't have the answer on the tank, but I can summarize. I can say that they brought the tank to the jungle and it didn't work out. So you can research that on your own. Big thing about guerrilla warfare is that the guerrillas, how do they interact with the land?
They climb trees.
Climb trees. Is it their home or not their home? Yeah, it's their home. That's a big characteristic of guerrillas.
Big advantage.
They're fighting for their homeland. Everyone else is a visitor. I don't know it like the back of my hand. I don't know all the terrain. So a big advantage for the guerrilla is that he's fighting for his homeland. He also has the motivation, right? This is my hometown, my backyard. Whereas the Americans who came in, it's just an area. So that's another big characteristic of the guerrilla warfare. Guys, that's true for the American Revolution. That's true for the Civil War in the South. We said that was an advantage for the South. I'm reviewing you. And then we see it again here as well. A big advantage that the Vietnamese had was they developed a large network of tunnels. And you can see this guy right here. They literally have these little hidey holes that they were physically smaller. Their person, like their genetics, were physically smaller. I doubt I could fit into that hole. Probably a little wide. That hole is probably skinnier than I am, right? So he's a tiny guy. You might think we value these big MMA guys, right? Muscles, linebacker type of a physique. That guy can still pull a trigger, right? That guy can still shoot you and kill you.
Allow for surprise attacks for sure.
That's right. The heart of the guerrilla strategy was the surprise attacks. So think you're an American on patrol. You're walking along with your platoon. You got your rifle at the ready. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, shot. You turn around, you look. This guy, he's already back into the ground before you even saw what happened. It was very frustrating to the Americans, and it was a big advantage to the enemy. So a couple pictures of these hidey holes, and you can see it was a whole network of tunnels. These are actually still there today. This is a more modern picture. You could go to Vietnam and visit these.
I don't know about you, that gives me claustrophobic.
Big network of tunnels, and in fact, they even open up in basically living spaces. They could sleep there. They could eat there. They had their military commanders have rooms where they could lay their maps out and plan the battle. So these network of tunnels was a big advantage for the Vietnamese.
And by nature, they were much skinnier just by the area that they come from. You know, we all come from different things, but they were much smaller, so they were able to get in those and fit in those a lot easier than we as Americans, so to speak, could actually fit in them. But we did have some smaller ones go in.
Do you remember movie Forrest Gump? There's the scene about Vietnam, and he actually Forrest Gump. Now I know that's a fictional character, but I'm just trying to make it make sense for you. Forrest Gump actually goes into one of these tunnels. Do you remember how he does it?
No.
So that action of going into the tunnels, that's called being a tunnel rat. And they'd actually pick the skinny guy, right? If you were in the platoon and you were on the smaller side, you might become a tunnel rat. And they'd give you a flashlight. You hold it kind of reverse grip like this, and a pistol. And you go head first into these tunnels, wiggling on into the tunnel. That's all you had. You couldn't get a rifle in there. You couldn't get a flamethrower in there. Maybe you could drop grenades, but you really didn't know what if it was a munitions container, fuel store, like tunnel rats are how we did it. They went in there and they would shoot the next thing they saw, right? Whether it's an enemy, they just tunnel rats. So tunnel rats, that's one big strategy.
So is that a better way of not getting disease and stuff?
Living in the tunnels.
It was definitely an advantage for the Vietnamese.
It was their home for sure. They have done this for decades. They built up this network over 40, 50 years. So it was almost like a home for them, the tunnel system. Good point right there. What else was I going to say? Oh, and so to root out these tunnels, you couldn't just do it with bombs. You couldn't just do it with tanks. You had to do it kind of one at a time. So that was very tedious, and that made it very difficult on the Americans. Okay? That's a lot of kind of extra information. Students usually find that interesting, but for some reason JR's falling asleep. I don't get it. I don't know. Here's an interesting one. You ever heard the phrase booby trap?
Yeah.
You're like, he just said booby. Booby trap. This is called a punji stick hit, and actually this next picture shows how it works pretty well. They would dig a hole into the earth, okay, so like six feet down. They put these spikes. Now flick back to this next picture. You see the spikes there? They put these spikes in the pit. Then they cover it up with a temporary flooring that as soon as I stepped on it, and I put my 200 pounds of weight on it, the floor collapses. And when the floor collapses, where does my body go? Onto the spikes.
And it wasn't like you could see them because they covered it where it looked like the.
So now, once this starts being used, every step I take, I'm scared. I'm scared that every next step might put me into the punji stick hit. So this was a big strategy. It sounds real simple to use a booby trap like this, but this was a big thing that gave the Vietnamese enemy a big advantage over the Americans. And then, little side extra. Students always groan at this one. Little side extra. If you wanted to be might have even been against the rules of war technically, but if you wanted to really inflict some pain on your enemy, you would put poisons on the tip of the spike, and in a pinch, if you didn't have anything else working for you, you might put some fecal matter on it. You know what that is? If you put, sounds gross, right? If you put poop on the end of this spike, and then that spike goes into the victim, it's going to spread bacteria and infection and disease. So kind of a pretty cruel and inhumane way to kill your enemy.
And if it was poisonous, like those, what were they, dark poisonous?
Poison dart frogs, same idea there, yeah.
They will make you very, very sick and sometimes could kill you, so.
Yep. So
they're
that was
smart.
kind of some extra. I showed you some pictures, try to illustrate the war for you. Very different from World War II. A lot of people would say, why are we in Vietnam, right? We're not saving the world this time. Why am I going to die in a punji stick pit for something that's not really saving the world? Why are we involved in Vietnam? This is going to start to be a problem at home. All right, everybody on your feet, on your feet, on your feet. JR and Jose have earned us 10 air squats. JR, you have earned the class 10 air squats, so let's lead. Come on. You refusing? JR, stand up on your feet. Stand up on your feet. Leon, you too. Jose. Levante say. Is that okay? Check it out. Check it out. JR, keep your head up.
I wasn't
Keep
even
your
everything
head
about Vietnam.
up.
Same for you.
Sit down.
Get up.
Sit down.
Can't you just stay sitting? That's fine.
I have my high school degree. You don't. Make good choices. The Tet Offensive. This is the one big battle that I really have time to tell you about.
Yes, right, green.
And what I want you to write down is what's in green. So this is the year 1968. There are about 500,000 Americans in Vietnam. That's setting the scene for you. Tet is actually a holiday. It's the Vietnamese New Year. What it is the Lunar New Year. I think it falls on January 6th because it follows the lunar calendar, not exactly the 365-day calendar. So I think it falls, January 5th or 6th. And it is considered the most important holiday in Vietnam. If you're in America, you probably say Christmas. If you're Jewish, you would say Yom Kippur. If you're Muslim, you would say Ramadan, right? Every religion has its most important holiday. Well, in Vietnam, they're dominantly Buddhist, and the Buddhist religion cares about the lunar calendar, so that makes this the most important holiday in the country of Vietnam. When you are celebrating Christmas, what do you do on Christmas morning? Wake up, Leon says go straight to the gifts. Are you kind of just chilling and relaxing? Right? You're enjoying the holiday? Well, the Americans assumed that the Vietnamese would be enjoying their holiday. They did not presume that they would attack on Tet. So the Americans had their guard down. They were not ready for an attack. But in fact, the Vietnamese said, yeah, it might be our holiday, but we're going to try to take this to our advantage. And they attack at the beginning of Tet. They attack on the holiday. Reminds me of another great military operation that happened on a major holiday. Can you guess what I'm thinking about?
George Washington.
Renee just says Christmas. JR finished it with George Washington. George Washington attacks on Christmas Day during the American Revolution. So the Battle of Trenton. So every now and then, do you see how history repeats itself? Like you don't even have to wonder what's coming next because it's just going to repeat itself anyway, right? So the more you know history, the more you're able to understand what might be coming next in the world. So I think I'll just find that's interesting. We, the Americans, let our guard down, even though the father of our country was known for attacking on Christmas, right? All right, Tet Offensive. In total, this was not a one-day attack. This was a month-long attack. And over the course of the month, over 100 cities and bases and outposts are attacked. And something real significant about the Tet Offensive is that it makes its way onto American televisions. Television is kind of a new piece of technology. Instead of having to read about the news or hear it on the radio or get pictures way after the fact, we're able to see it happening in our living rooms in moving pictures, live motion on our own television set. So the Tet Offensive makes its way to American television screens and really starts to show the country how bad the war is. So it really wakes up the public, kind of turns public attention against the war. Public support decreases for the war because of the Tet Offensive. The problem with all of this was that at the starting point, American generals had been lying to the Americans about how the war was going. Americans believed the war was going well. Generals, a lot of times they inflated body counts. If they really killed 10 people in a firefight, they'd say, we killed 1,000. So it kind of felt like we were winning the war. And if you were counting the bodies based off these false reports, you'd be like, man, we're killing thousands of them. We gotta be winning the war. Well, that amounts to a bunch of lies, and it really kind of tricks the American public. One general, General Westmoreland, he asks for 200,000 more soldiers to come and end the war, right? Like, hey, we're kind of at a stuck here. Like, we need to really break the logjam. 200,000 more soldiers, and we'll win this war. Now, if you are about to graduate high school, and they're about to draft 200,000 more young men into service, what are you thinking? You're probably against that 200,000 person troop increase, right? So that's part of it, is that the generals were lying to the public and with the inflated body counts. The communist forces were not on the verge of defeat. And in fact, this Tet Offensive really catches us off guard and leads to, like I already said, these scenes being played on television really wakes up the American public. So I'm going to show a picture. It's a little bit harsh. If you don't want to look at it, that's fine. These are the type of images that showed up on American screens. Executions in the street. So the man being shot, he's actually a communist. He's being executed in the streets. It is said that he murdered a colonel and 8 other people. So it is said that he was a murderer. But instead of a trial, instead of doing it in the courts, it's just chaos in the streets. The man shooting him is South Vietnamese, so that is our friend. But when this shows up in the newspapers, when this shows up on the television screen, America's like, what is going on in Vietnam? Why are we involved in the war? This shows how Americans were watching the war on their television screens. And then this is another really iconic photo that what if that was your son? Any of those young men. What if that was your son, your brother, your nephew, your uncle, and you're seeing Americans bloodied and battered and retreating. These guys lost the fight. Okay, they are retreating out of the city, literally on their tank because they don't have medical helicopters. They don't have all the support they need, and they're just getting out of there on the back of their tank. This was showing the Americans, we are not winning the war. And it was these type of photos and videos that was coming into our living rooms that really made people be like, wow, things are not going well.
I remember up to this point, it was newspaper, it was phone, so TV really starts moving its way in. And it's already a scary time because you're already asking for all of these troops to go over there, these young boys. And then when you actually see it, it's like, holy crap, like, what are we doing? Okay,
This is
so it's a wake-up call through the TV.
This is a very famous TV reporter, Walter Cronkite. He is the voice of the evening news for many decades. And as a younger man, he went to Vietnam because that's what good reporters do. That's what good journalists do. Maybe you'll be a journalist someday. Maybe some of you want to be involved in the media. You got to go where the story is. So you can see, he put on his helmet, he put on his bulletproof vest, and he went to where the story was. He saw it with his own eyes. That's what a good journalist does. And here are his words, his assessment. He says, "It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate." And he was a pretty powerful voice in the media. So his opinion that we were not going to win the war, a lot of people, a lot of public opinion started to turn against the war. Let me fast forward a little bit here. So the government saying that we were near a victory, but in fact we actually weren't. The public was a little chapped by that. We thought we'd been lied to. The Tet Offensive really contributed to public opinion going downward. And in fact, it has a big impact on the 1968 presidential election. Now, I'm not full on teaching that one to you right now, but I'll give you a little hint here. President Johnson, he's tired.
It's the
See
same
that
thing you
picture?
saw in the first 8 that we showed you.
That man looks tired. He actually decides to not run for president. It's very likely he would have won another term. He was not breaking the two-term precedent, right? He could have run for another term. But he is so tired, he's war-weary, he's worn down, that he decides to not run for president. And what that does is it opens the door to a new candidate who becomes Richard Nixon of the Republicans. And Nixon says, hey, I'm a Republican. I'm the face of I'm a fresh face. The Democrats, they've been messing this up for 10 years now, so elect me as a Republican. And that's what happens in the election in 1968. But what I want you to focus on is the war-weary, tired, worn-down President Johnson. This all happens because of the Tet Offensive. So one of the major military battles in the Vietnam War, the Tet Offensive. When we come back, we'll talk about the Vietnam War at home. Let's go the short way and come on back.
Well, I seen a movie about that. It's called,
About what?
where the man, where they held a gun to the man,
Uh-huh.
thought he said. The movie called, it's called The Power, but I'm seeing it.
I'm gonna knock his ass.
Here you go, Nancy. Thank you.
Oh, we should have been gone to the bathroom, bro. I was fine.
David!
We just talked.
Oh, yeah.
You're not participating on Fox today?
Rashid, get my class.
It's in here too.
And okay.
All right, siéntate, seats.
Hey, listen.
She
Remember,
said-
I gotta tell something.
What we learning today?
Did you see
Vietnam.
Chris? He had that blonde wig on. He said he
Yeah,
the new
it's not saying.
Bro, he look like Jacqueline.
Oh,
Hey, I got more to get to.
You should have been.
Yeah, real talk, all the real talk in the world. There's no more head up, stand up, sit up, push up, whatever.
hey, I gotta stand up because I'm in the room.
Good choice. Good choice. Keep your feet in, okay? I get it. This is more talking than usual. I don't have any water to spill on anyone today. I mean,
You got J.R. Sebastian.
Listen, I'm a teacher who's gonna say, I get it. I'm throwing a lot of information at you. I'm trying to make it interesting, but I am throwing a lot of information at you. Head going down is gonna result in you standing up. No more ask, no more cute little jokes.
No more
Get up, stand up,
ask.
push up. I'm gonna put you on your feet. So thank you for standing up and staying awake. Here we go. The Vietnam War at home, it was not popular, right? We're focusing on the international issues, but I'm gonna bring it home for a second. What's that called when it's at home? Domestic issues, that's right. Many protests against the war. People hated the draft. People thought that we were killing civilians. A lot of soldiers were called baby killers. A lot of pilots who dropped the bombs were called baby killers. That's a pretty harsh thing to come home and be told, like you're serving in the military, you're trying to stay alive, you come home and get called a baby killer. That's gonna hurt your head a little bit, right? It's gonna hurt your heart. So there were a lot of protests. It's okay to protest in America. You can hold a sign. You got the right to free speech. You got the right to assembly. But here's what you can't do: get violent. If your protest gets violent, now we have a problem. A lot of these protests turn violent. One of them at a university, is at Kent State University, started to get violent, started to get out of control. The university calls in the National Guard, the Ohio National Guard. That's what state it was in. I can really empathize with that because I'm in the National Guard, right? I can understand getting called in to try to keep the peace. Well, at this university, while some of the students were getting rowdy, almost kind of like the Boston Massacre, we don't really know where the first shots come from, but all of a sudden you have the National Guard shooting into the crowd, and some people were killed. Some students were killed. So you have the Army shooting citizens. That doesn't help anything out, right? So this is a period of high unrest, and the war was very, very unpopular at home. That is a big, fat summary statement, right? That encompasses a lot. The war was extremely unpopular. Well, let me tell you how we get out of Vietnam. How do we finish this story? Fast forward to 1973. This is President Nixon. He's the one that comes after Tired Man Johnson, right? Remember that picture of Johnson being all tired? This is the guy that comes next. Nixon he runs on the idea that he'll get us out of Vietnam. Vote for me, we'll get out of Vietnam while I'm president. 1973, it hasn't happened yet. People are like, bro, thought you were going to get us out of Vietnam. How come it hasn't happened yet, Nevaeh?
So if he wanted to take control so bad, why he up there looking like that?
Like that? Well, I mean, listen, anyone can get a bad picture taken of him, right? It's kind of funny to find the bad, but he was just giving a speech, right? You can't grab onto that. Nixon wants to reestablish good relationships all around the world. The Vietnam War, it's not just hurting us at home, it's hurting us on the international stage. People don't want to trade with us. People don't trust us, right? We've been inflating body counts. We've been murdering civilians, even if it's by accident, because it's hard to know who the enemy is. We're kind of taking a hit on the international stage. Nixon wants to fix our reputation. He definitely wants to fix things at home, all the anti-war protests. So his idea to get us out of the war is called Vietnamization. Now, I'll tell you this is not on the test, but I don't know how to finish the story without telling it, right? I got to tell you this part. Vietnamization is the U.S. withdrawing from Vietnam and giving the responsibility back to the South Vietnamese. Excellent picture here, right? You see this guy, he's using his finger just like I use a pointer. The war started with very few people, Americans, in Vietnam. It goes all the way up to the peak of 549,000. But Vietnamization is the drawdown that will get us all the way out of Vietnam by 1974, right? Started with few, we have get to the peak, but then we're going to get all the way out. Very, very similar to the war in Afghanistan. So we're almost seeing history be repeated right in front of ourselves. When we leave, it's essentially going to be a civil war between North and South. Hey, South Vietnam, it was nice hanging out with you guys, but your turn to do the fight. And essentially that's going to leave them with the civil war on their hands.
Is Vietnam still split up between North and South?
To this day, Vietnam is unified and it is communist. Unfortunately, it is unified, but unfortunately, it is communist. So we really lost the war, right? We did not stop the spread of communism throughout this whole 20-year
So y'all
conflict.
really kind of fought for that.
What's that?
So they really kind of fought for that.
They really kind of fought for nothing. And that's difficult for a lot of Vietnam veterans. To be honest, that's going to be difficult for a lot of Afghanistan veterans in the future because it kind of feels like the same. I think, I'll give you my personal story. I think I'm healthy, I'm grounded, I'm a good family. I don't feel like I lost a lot of myself there, but I am sad for people who lost their lives there. I'm sad for people who lost their legs there. I'm sad for people who are hurt because of what happened in Afghanistan. And in a way, it kind of feels like we didn't make much progress. So that's kind of a different conversation for a different day. Here's how we get out of the war. It's a lot of words, just let me tell it to you. We say, hey, South Vietnam, we won't abandon you. Okay, listen, sign this peace treaty. Lay down your arms, armistice, lay down your arms. We will never abandon you until we abandon you in 1975. We told them we wouldn't abandon them.
What they doing?
This is the last Americans in South Vietnam, which the North Vietnamese creeping on. Okay, they're about to attack. Literally, they're about to attack. These are the last Americans from the American embassy leaving on the last helicopter out of Vietnam. They are literally climbing to the rooftop to get a ride home.
All
Yeah.
them fit in that little thing.
Yes. And I have to say, it looks eerily similar. So this is a pretty powerful picture because it actually shows the people getting on the airplane. On the left-hand side, that is in Afghanistan 2 months ago. On the right-hand side, that is in Vietnam in 1975. It looks exactly the same. The last helicopter out of Afghanistan, the last helicopter out of South Vietnam, it looks exactly the same. So there are a lot of comparisons that can be made between these two wars. Here's the big summary on Vietnam. I got to get to some other stuff too. In Vietnam, we gradually increased our troop strength. We were trying to take on the spread of communism. Got to put a lid on it, right? So we start with a good idea. But as we are at the peak of our troop strength and Americans are dying and people at home don't understand why, blood and guts in the streets, and we don't know why, man, we got to get out of Vietnam. So what started as us trying to help the Vietnamese by giving them aid and training turns into combat and eventually turns into us leaving. Unfortunately, it was a very high cost, more costly than the American people were willing to, a cost higher than we were willing to bear. And arguably, we lost the war. You guys have kind of already come to that conclusion for yourself. Picture I got on the screen there, that black hat with the gold lettering. It's a whole lot like my Afghanistan veteran hat right there as well. Have you ever seen someone wearing a hat similar to this in town? Maybe some of your kin, uncles, grandpas, whatever. Here's what I would ask you to do. This is my veteran speech. When you see someone wearing a hat like that, maybe it says Korea, maybe it says Vietnam, maybe it just says Army veteran, Marines veteran, whatever. Eventually you're going to see Iraq, Afghanistan, because people who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan are kind of young right now, but getting older. When you see someone wearing a black hat like that, and it doesn't just have to be that black hat, it could be a t-shirt, whatever. Say thank you is an easy thing, right? That's the big thing. Thank you for your service. A lot of people say that. But here's what I would challenge you to do. A lot of people say, thank you for your service. All right, I gotta go. I would challenge you to say thank you, to mean it. Yeah, say thank you and mean it. But then ask them for a life lesson. What did the military teach? Do you mind sharing with me some of your stories? Now, some of them, they may have wounds, they may have scars, they may be hurt, and they don't want to talk about it, and that's, you got to kind of understand that. But a lot of them are very willing to talk. A lot of them have a lot of wisdom, life experience. The older ones, unfortunately, are starting to pass away and die off. When you see someone who is a veteran, they're proud of it, they're wearing their hat, say thank you, ask them for a story, if it's possible, sit down, buy a coffee, and chat for a while. That is my challenge to you. No bonus points. I won't give you bonus points. Just do it because it's a good thing to do. So moving on. This is the National Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. It's a very solemn, special, kind of sad place to be. What's really cool about the wall is that all the names are etched into the wall, and you could take a sheet of paper and you could rub a pencil or a crayon, you could rub some rub onto it, and the name will etch onto your paper. It's kind of a healing thing for people who are really hurt by Vietnam. They're able to take a name with them, take their relative's name, take their friend's name. This is art, but it's pretty powerful. This shows how a lot of Vietnam veterans, it's a healing place for them. They come and think about their friends, they read their name, they have a time of reflection, and hopefully it's a place where they can kind of heal. So that's the Vietnam Veterans Wall in Washington, D.C. Right next to the wall, pretty much associated with the wall, is my single favorite statue in all the museums and all the statues that I've showed you before. This is my favorite. This is called the Three Soldiers, and it represents soldiers in Vietnam. Now, I love this because I can read their eyes. I can see the expression on their face, and I've felt that before myself. But what's really cool about this, Nevaeh is pretty close. The guy in front, he represents a white, Caucasian, white American, white male. The guy on the far right, he is African American. You can tell in his complexion, his hair, his skin, he's African American. And the guy on the left, he's Hispanic American. So it shows that when you're in combat, when you're in war, when you're in the military fighting together, man, you don't care the race, gender, socioeconomic status, political beliefs, religion. You don't care about what's next to you. He's your buddy, he's your brother. So pretty cool that in a divided nation, and there's a lot of issues, there were a lot of issues, and there are a lot of issues, that statue represents the brotherhood of everyone that fought in Vietnam. So pretty cool, pretty powerful thing. Should you ever get a chance to go to Washington, D.C., it'd be a great thing for you to visit. But guess what? You don't have to go to Washington, D.C. to see a Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Where can you go? You can go to Dairy Queen. You can go to this the Veterans Park, literally right. That's in Alma. That's right next to Dairy Queen. What's that?
Is that for the soldiers that reside in the
So yeah, these names don't represent deaths. They represent Alma residents who served. And you know what? I bet a lot of you have kin on this wall. I'm married into Alma, right? I'm married into my wife's family, and there are two Hollands on the wall. So Uncle Jerry and Uncle Roger are on the wall right there. And JK, you say you got some kin on the wall? Anybody else? You know you got your kin on the stones right here? There's also a backside. I don't know exactly which war, I don't know what's on the backside of each one. I think it's the same one, just on the backside. But what you got?
The airplane. Okay.
Where did that come from? I always see
My papa drove that.
the helicopter.
But what war is it in?
Yeah, so I don't know the entire story of the helicopter. I know it's decommissioned. It used to be a real helicopter. It wouldn't fly anymore, but I think it's called a Cobra helicopter, and it's pretty cool. I don't know if it was in a war, but it was a part of service. And then once it was decommissioned, I bet Alma bought it and said that we'll put it up as a memorial, all that kind of stuff. So my point is, pretty cool place where you can go pay your respects. Think about, next time you're at Dairy Queen, you know what, get a Blizzard, walk on over, and just have a second to think. Read some of the names, see if you recognize,
Right, Jose?
and just have that moment of reflection. So pretty cool opportunity you guys have right here in Alma, right? You don't have to go on a vacation. You can still do that right here. That was a little lengthier on Vietnam than I expected. I'm going to try to go a little faster on these next couple because I got to get through them. Space race, write this down. We've talked the space race 3 days in a row now, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit further.
Thunder
The
Sputnik and the space race.
symbolic competition between the Cold War powers. The good thing is we weren't shooting at each other, but we were competing with each other. U.S. versus Russia. You got it says Sputnik and the space race on your notes. So use that block right there. Symbolic competition between the Cold War powers. Anybody know what she said? Symbolic competition between the Cold War powers. Should be pretty easy for you to write down.
They play all types of games.
We've talked at length about how the Russians actually won a lot of the firsts. They put a lot of points on the board, but the Americans got the big one. What was the big one? First man on the moon. That's right. So you do have moon landing on your page right here. I'm going to show you something about the moon landing here in a second. Moving on. Like I said, we had all the firsts, but the Americans, yay for us, we got the first person on the moon, and that's why we win the space race. Sputnik. Flip over to Sputnik, wherever Sputnik is on your pages. Sputnik, I want you to write down the whole slide here. It's all in green. Sputnik 1 was the first artificial Earth satellite.
That's my
Now,
birthday.
what's that?
It's together.
Oh, it's together. Okay, then continue writing right here. Continue writing. My bad. You know what, guys? Sometimes I don't exactly know what words I really want to emphasize for the week. So when I make your vocab, that's why. What this is, y'all, it is nothing more than a 150-pound ball of lead. But what was significant about it is that the Russians put it into space. They put it into space and it started orbiting the Earth. It did have a radio frequency on it, so you were able to track it as it went around the globe. It was launched into low Earth orbit, which is about what Jeff Bezos did in his little millionaire aircraft the other day, a couple weeks ago, in 1957. So 1957, we're at the height of the Cold War, right? We are at the beginning, we're kind of smack in the middle of wondering if each other is going to blow each other off the place of the planet. Brinkmanship, mutually assured destruction, we're all kind of at the midst of this. So if you were in America in 1957 and you heard that the Soviets had just put this satellite into orbit, what is something that you are worried about?
That's fine.
They're spying. That's a good thought. What else? They're going to attack us. It's a weapon. It's a missile. It's coming for us. It's coming for me. So there was great panic as Sputnik went into orbit in 1957. Here's what it actually looks like, and I'm telling you, it is nothing more than just this 150-pound ball of lead. But we didn't know that. Here's what the headlines looked like. Russian satellite circling the Earth. If I woke up and whipped open my newspaper and I saw that in 1957, I am worried that I might not make it through the day. What if they bomb me today? So people had a lot of fear that came out of this. Now, in the end, it was just a simple satellite. It was not a weapon, but we did lose. In a way, we lost because they got into space first. Go back. I'll go back real quick. I'll let you get this down. We got plenty of time.
I can tell you nowadays in a newspaper, they don't make headlines like that anymore. So if they did start putting something like that in the papers again, it might get our attention a little bit, don't you think? Being that big and bold. So it's a scary time for them for sure, because they're like, oh God, there's something new up there that's orbiting Earth, and oh, here we are.
You're
We're
referring
a
to the
sitting
big,
duck.
big bold headline?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mario, you got it? Not quite? Okay. I'll slow down. I'll slow down.
So then it kind of worried. And so they started shopping for like bunkers and things to put in, just like you would shop when somebody dies. You go find a casket, you go pick out the one you want, you go and pick out the shower you want in your house. You go everyone picking out these little bomb
School children started doing the duck and cover drill, just like you have a fire drill. They were starting to duck and cover underneath their desks as if that was going to save them from a nuclear bomb. So like I said, here's what it would have looked like in space. Super small, not all that significant. Here's the headline. Here's some things that come from that. No need to write, just listen to me. Americans are upset about losing. Okay? We all want to be the winners, but we lost. Well, this leads to the development of NASA, which is why it's on my podium right there. U.S. history. NASA, 1958. So many people wear NASA shirts these days. I don't even know why. NASA. Americans did fear that Sputnik could launch warheads, and this leads to the duck and cover.
I'm confused.
All right, check it out. Here is more for you to write.
Yes, write
Or
this
be
down.
right. This
Okay.
is it's not in green, but you might want to go on the back side of wherever you're at. I know this is not in green, but I want you to write all of this.
All of it.
All of it.
Yes, because these are influences that are related to Sputnik. It is bad that we lost, but a lot of good came out of it as well. We start to increase funding for science and math. And you know who we're actually funding? We weren't funding the 30, 40, 50-year-old scientists who were doing research. we're funding school level science and math. Your science and math classes today are affected by the changes that started in the 50s and 60s.
In a way.
We realized we got to teach our young people better. So science and math education got an increased focus. NASA is created, we already said that. New technology. Now there was that increased fear, and ultimately you cannot write the bottom one, that's fine. It leads to President Eisenhower passing some policies against the Soviet Union. Write everything but the bottom one, fit it on there, use shorthand.
I know it's a lot, but it is in your standards, and they very well could ask it on the ESC, what were the following influences of Sputnik? And it may have 3 of them listed and one say all of the above. Or it could say, these things were influenced, or these things were influenced by Sputnik and the advancement of space and da-da-da-da. Which one? Okay, so you gotta know them. It's on the card, it's a vocabulary term, so I know.
You writing it down is gonna log it in your brain. I tell a lot of good stories, and then like the next day I'm reviewing, and you guys are like, huh? So I know that we had a good class, and even still, once you go to sleep, you guys, huh? You forget about it. That's why writing it down is important. That's not dogging on you, that's real. When my preacher says something and I go to lunch, I forget what he says. If I don't take notes. Like usual, I try to give you a little picture, something to make it memorable. Science and math, maybe, just maybe, that'll come into your brain when you need it to. That's why we have interesting pictures.
So one day you may want to be a space engineer, or you might want to do something with engineering that involves science or math or whatever. You can think Sputnik for that. And you'll use it.
That's why it's so long.
All right, I'm about to move on. You can get it from a bud, or I can go back at the end of our class. Okay, I'm trying to drive to the finish line here. Here's the old ducky cover, right? I think what they're doing is kissing their butts goodbye.
Ain't no way.
There ain't no way that's going to protect you from a nuclear blast. And actually,
Maybe.
years later, it has been proven to be delusional. We said it was delusional to actually think that would protect us. But seriously, the way we have fire drills, right? We have fire drills and we leave the building. They would literally have ducky cover drills just in case there was a nuclear attack. Real cool story that comes out of this time period, this movie called Hidden Figures.
I seen it. I watched it.
Not just a movie, it's a real story. It actually is the story of 4 black women in the space race. Really powerful story.
Did she have to walk like a mile?
Would highly recommend that you embrace the learning that happens here. See,
Oh, that is a good.
right? See the story. That's it. So unfortunately, it didn't get popular. This story wasn't popular at the time because we're still dealing with some civil rights and race issues. But I'm grateful that stories like this are being told today, and that we can know about these women and of color, right? 2 minorities, and they use their mathematical abilities to put a man on the moon. That is pretty cool. Speaking of a man on the moon, let's talk about it real quick. I think I got moon landing, man on the moon, something
No,
like that.
it's not, but you'll have to add it on the other.
Add it in, sorry. Next semester I'll be more situated. You guys are cutting trail for me. Americans are generally fascinated by the idea of landing on the moon. We set a goal to send a man to the moon. JR, do you have a goal to bench press 250 pounds someday? If you have a goal, you usually want to set the date that you want to accomplish it by, right? Otherwise, it's just open-ended, and you really don't know if you're going to accomplish that goal. Well, we said we want to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade, the 60s. President Kennedy, he says this in the year 1963. Guess what? He dies in the year 1963. He never sees this happen. But one of his big legacies is that he set this goal for our country, and we achieved it. Here's his statement. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. So major legacy of President Kennedy is the space program and the idea that we put a man on the moon. We put a man on the moon on July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong, first man to walk on the moon. Buzz Aldrin, second man to walk on the moon. Really significant is that it was on television. It wasn't about putting a man on the moon as much as it was showing that we put a man on the moon. That's how you really win the space race. is you show that you did it. And we planted our flag on the moon. Did that mean that we own the moon? No, it was symbolic. It was a it was a up yours to the Russians.
Like
It
US
was-
did it.
It was a symbolic
Is
planting
it
of the
still
moon.
up there?
So I've read a lot about that. It is assessed that that flag is probably bleached white based on the sun and the UV rays and all that stuff. So the flag itself is still there, but it's most likely bleached white. But that's not what I like to think of. I like to think of the flag flying on the moon. Here's the actual astronauts that landed on the moon. So you have,
They still alive.
you have Neil Armstrong. He was the first man to walk on the moon. He's not alive. He passed away a few years ago. This is Michael Collins. He did not walk on the moon because he was the space shuttle pilot. He actually had to pilot the aircraft that these men entered, and then it took them back into orbit. So in a way, he was really self-sacrificial. He did not walk on the moon. He came so close, but he was a very important part of the crew because he's the one that got them back home. The second man to walk on the moon is Buzz Aldrin. He is still alive today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him in a second. Here's that super famous photograph of the flag actually planted on the moon. Now, I'd be a bad historian if I didn't tell you this. There are a bunch of conspiracy theories about landing on the moon. I am not going to get into it. But if you want to read the whole story, if you want to do some thinking on your own, it's kind of interesting to read both sides, and then you decide for yourself.
There's no wind in.
This is a picture. My friend Buzz Aldrin went to school at West Point. That's right. At West Point, much of the history we teach is made by the people we taught. There's Buzz Aldrin right there. This is actually a picture of Buzz Aldrin. This is a really famous photograph, and it was taken by Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. It's of Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon. So Buzz Aldrin is in one of those most famous photographs of all time. And of course, you have to think that Buzz Aldrin was the inspiration for Buzz Lightyear. That's real. The Toy Story Pixar creators used Buzz Aldrin as motivation for Buzz Lightyear. Buzz Aldrin is active on social media. He's on Facebook and Instagram, and the dude's funny. He's in his 80s, but he is with it. He is relevant. His big,
Hey, got somebody that don't go to West Point.
his big idea, yeah, I'll talk, Jimmy Carter, he went to the Naval Academy. Buzz Aldrin walks on the moon. I'm gonna round it out here, okay, so just hang with me. Buzz Aldrin walks on the moon. Today, his big motto, his big motivator is to try to put someone on Mars. His phrase is GYATM, get your butt to Mars. He wants America to walk on Mars. He wants someone to walk on Mars. That would be like the next legacy is for us to not just go to the moon, but to go all the way to Mars. So I would encourage you to look up my man Buzz Aldrin on social media and see the kind of things that he posts. So I'm going to stop there. There's one small chunk I didn't get to. We'll just pick up with it tomorrow, okay? JR, what's your question?
Do you post this on YouTube?
Privately.
Cause I be all looking in the video.
For real,
I be all in the video.
I do it for people that are